All right, we can start once to hit 6:30. The YouTube channel is up.
Okay, thank you. So I will call this meeting to order. We do have regrets from Councillor Kiley, Vice Chair Kiley. Councillor Hill has generously agreed to Vice Chair for tonight. So, but we are good to go. So I'll just read, we have both some a public meeting and some action items in our regular meeting. So I will read the introduction. There we go. Shuffled all my sheets. Here we go. Notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of the public hearing and process is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. Interested members of the public can email the committee clerk or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. This public meeting is held to gather public opinion. An explanation to this rule is combined reports, which consolidates the public meeting and comprehensive reports. These applications are deemed by staff as straightforward and routine. This business practice has been in place for a number of years and is received by the applicants as efficient customer service and effective use of committee time. Please note that staff use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report. I'm sorry, I've lost my place. It's been a long day. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of relevant information gathered and is then referred back to the planning services staff for the presentation of a comprehensive report and recommendations to planning committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When the review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. The committee then makes a recommendation on the application to City Council. City Council has the final say on the application from the city perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. And our first order of business tonight is concerning 168, 172 Wellington Street and 99 Brock Street. And I believe it's a Carico represented by Fotan. So we will turn to them, the presenter.
Thank you and good evening. Can you hear me okay?
The volume's a little low.
Okay, I'll try.
Move closer, that would be great. Thank you, Ms. Wood.
Okay, great, thank you. And through you, good evening, Planning Committee, members of the public and staff. My name is Jennifer Wood. I'm a land use planner with Foten Planning and Design, and I'm here this evening representing the applicant, Carico Development Corporation, to present a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the property at 168, 172 Wellington Street and 99 Brock Street. Next slide, please. So the property is located in the heart of the central business district downtown. The surrounding area is characterized by a mix of uses, mostly commercial and residential. The property is in close proximity of a number of transit routes as well as parks, and open space is within walking distance of the waterfront and is of course very close to a number of commercial amenities and services located within the downtown. Next slide, please. The property is located on the northwest corner of Wellington and Brock Street. It's 614 square meters in size and currently developed with a 4-story stone building. The building has been vacant for a few years now, but was most recently occupied by a Scotiabank branch and offices. And you can see in this aerial image that the property is almost entirely occupied by building footprint. There is a small courtyard at the rear, which has historically been used to store mechanical equipment. The property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, so it is a protected heritage structure. Uses to the north and the east and the south are all generally 3 to 4 story mixed use buildings, and immediately to the west is the Hanson Memorial parking structure. Next slide, please. The property is designated Central Business District, which is the land use designation that applies to the majority of the central core of downtown Kingston. And this designation permits a broad range of uses, including retail, business, office, open space, as well as medium and high density residential uses. Next slide, please. The intent of the application is to repurpose the interior of the building to accommodate a restaurant on the ground floor and a total of 17 residential units in the upper levels. So the brown color in this concept plan illustrates the existing building footprint, which will not change. The building, the municipal sidewalk is proposed to be bumped out. So that's that orangey color that you're seeing on the concept plan in order to accommodate a patio on Wellington Street. So that would be that sort of salmon color. The dark gray box at the back is the only undeveloped portion of the site. And this area previously was used to store mechanical equipment, and the intent is to relocate that mechanical equipment to the roof of the building so that this area can be repurposed as an open air courtyard for the restaurant. In order to accommodate the relocation of the mechanical equipment, a new mechanical deck is proposed to be constructed into the existing roof line. So the deck is the area shown in this concept plan in purple. And then the 3 pieces of mechanical equipment are outlined in red. Next slide, please. These are the proposed floor plans. The ground floor plan, which is in the top left, is intended to be occupied by a restaurant, but based on the zoning could be occupied by any number of commercial and retail uses. It will have, and you can see it in sort of the top right corner, that open space, the only vacant portion of the property will be reclaimed to become an open air patio for that commercial space. The main entrance to the restaurant is going to be the long-standing main commercial entrance right at the corner of the intersection. And then the residential main entrance will be off of Wellington Street, sort of pretty central to the building. So you'll walk in, you can either turn right to access the commercial space or go straight through a secure entrance where there's a mailroom and then an elevator that goes up to the residential units. There's also a secondary entrance off of Brock Street, which provides access to a ground level secure bike storage room with a capacity for 18 bicycles. The upper 3 levels will contain a total of 17 residential units. So there are 7 units proposed on the second floor, 1 and 2 bedroom units. And then 10 units will occupy both the 3rd and 4th levels. Now, looking quickly at the building from the outside, you might think it's just a 3-story building, but in fact, there's actually a shorter 4th level that will contain bedrooms connected to the 3rd floor unit. So these units will be quite unique in that they'll occupy 2 levels. The living, dining, and kitchen space will be on the 3rd floor, and then each unit will have an independent stairway up to a couple of loft bedrooms on the 4th floor. Next slide, please. These are the building elevations. The only external change to the building, aside from there have been some work to the stone, there will be some work to the stone and also windows, but in terms of like true structural changes, the only change will be the introduction of a mechanical deck within the inside roof line, which will allow for mechanical equipment to be relocated from the current or previous at-grade location and get it up onto the roof. Just for illustrative purposes, I've highlighted the mechanical equipment in red so you can see the extent of the visual impact, which is quite minor. And what we're going to find is that at the pedestrian level, when you're walking down Wellington Street or up Brock, this new equipment will have little to no visual impact to the streetscape. And I'd also just note that these physical changes have no bearing on the zoning and have been approved already through Heritage Kingston. Next slide, please. This is the current zoning applicable to the site. It's the C1-3 Heritage Commercial zoning. Next slide, please. We're proposing a zoning bylaw amendment to take this to a new site-specific C1 zone. There won't be any reliefs required to address any changes in the built form. It's simply required to permit the internal conversion of the upper levels to residential use. The maximum permitted density in this zone is 123 units per net hectare, which based on the property's size would only allow up to 7 units within 3 floors of a large building, which is not very practical and would result in extremely large unit sizes. Instead, the proposal includes 17 residential units over 3 floors, which will result in a density of 244 units per hectare. But again, no changes to the built form, no added height, no added gross floor area, simply allowing for those units within the existing structure. We are also seeking a reduction in bicycle parking stall width from 0.6 to 0.45 meters, no change to the stall length. And this is simply so that we can squeeze a few more spaces in and provide at least one bike space per residential unit. The zoning bylaw does require one parking space, vehicle parking space per residential unit in the downtown. There is no parking requirement for commercial uses. The site is currently fully developed and there are no opportunities to provide parking. So in this case, we are proposing to provide cash in lieu of parking in this instance. Given the site's central location, being located within walking distance of grocery stores, employment opportunities, amenities, as well as transit, residents will be in a position to walk or use other modes of transportation to get around. Next slide, please. So keeping it short and sweet, just to summarize, it's my opinion that this proposed zoning bylaw amendment represents good land use planning because it's consistent with the PPS, it conforms with the policies of the official plan. It will help contribute to the supply of housing within the central business district in proximity to a number of services and amenities located in the downtown. As well, it sensitively repurposes a heritage designated building. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from Planning Committee or members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question, as we usually do for staff. Are there any, did we receive any correspondence or calls regarding this file?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have not received any comments on this zoning application.
Thank you very much. We'll now go into the committee and ask any questions of the proponent, and then we'll open it to the public. So are there any questions? Yes, Acting Vice Chair Hill. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is the anticipated use of these residences as apartments for rent or as condos for sale?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your question. They're intended to be rental units.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'll go turn to the clerk, and if there are any members of the public who wish to make comments or ask questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There are two members of the public in the gallery, so if you would like to speak, please utilize the raise hand tool within Zoom to raise your hand to identify yourself as a speaker. For the individual that is on their phone, if you hit star and then the number 9, that will raise your hand. So we'll give you a few seconds. And seeing there are no speakers, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll go back to the committee, and I just had a quick question for clarification purposes. Because this is listed or designated, I presume it's gone through the Heritage Committee. Is that accurate? Or will it be before the comprehensive report?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This proposal has received approval, but it was done under staff's delegated authority.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll declare this public meeting completed then. And thank you, Ms. Wood. We'll now go to the second meeting, which was showing as for Graceland Avenue, and again, FOTEN consultants were handling that. This, just for clarification purposes, I want to mention that we're going to have a non-statutory public meeting tonight because of a timing I'll call it a faux pas. And so this is not going to be a statutory meeting, but we're going to treat it as if it were a statutory meeting. And then there'll be a statutory meeting prior to the comprehensive report that we'll vote on probably sometime in November. Having said that, any members of the public who want to make comment regarding this probably should do it in writing so that you will indeed have status after the final report. I'll turn to staff. Did I butcher that explanation at all? If somebody from planning can verify that that was okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just for clarification, it's Paige speaking. Yes, you are correct. So there was an error, an accidental error that was made by staff in the way that we gave notice for this particular application. So you're correct that we only came upon the error yesterday, and just out of fairness to the members of the public that were already communicated with about this meeting and the applicant, we thought we would go ahead and host it. It is non-statutory because we didn't technically give notice sufficiently in terms of all of the requirements of the Planning Act, but we will be doing that at a future meeting before the comprehensive report is considered on this matter. So certainly any feedback that's provided tonight, it is an opportunity to make sure that that people are either providing that in writing to the committee or making sure that they provide us with their contact information and that's minuted so that we can ensure that they receive notice of the next public meeting and also have an ability to speak in public to the matter, or again through the written submission would also secure their appeal rights. So with apologies on that this evening, but we felt that it was too late to actually cancel the meeting and be able to get a hold of people. So we decided to proceed this evening, but with our apologies, and we'll ensure that we have a second meeting that will meet all the statutory requirements under the Act as required.
Thank you, Ms. Agnew. That was a more comprehensive explanation than I made, so I appreciate it. So we will now turn to, I guess it's FOTAN that will present regarding this non-statutory public meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and staff and members of the public. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a land use planner with FOTAN Planning and Design, and presenting the application for zoning bylaw amendment at 620 and 630 Graceland Avenue on behalf of the applicant, Creative Homes by MacAdam. Next slide, please. So the subject property is shown on this slide with an aerial image overlaying with a circle that's based on a 600-meter radius. What this is showing is that the subject property is located in the west end of the city, in the Bay Ridge West neighborhood. So that's west of Bay Ridge Drive and north of Bath Road. It is in a residential area. Houses in the area range from 1 to 2 stories in height. Commercial uses are in proximity to the site along Bath Road. And the site is close to some transit routes, particular an express bus route along Bay Ridge Drive, as well as some other bus routes to the north and south. There are some parks and schools in the area. And I'll note here, just so that we're not, there's no confusion, the walking distances to some of these locations like the express bus stops and the grocery store are a little bit more than 600 meters just because of the way the roads and the sidewalks are, but geographically those locations are within 600 meters of the property. Next slide, please. Thank you. On this slide, we're showing the subject property again, but just in an aerial image that's zoomed in a little bit closer. And what you can see from here is the area that's subject to be rezoned, or that's proposed to be rezoned. You can see the subject property, the properties have frontage along Graceland and Forest Hill. So just because the properties are oriented sort of north and south, I'll start with 630 Graceland, which is the property on the north side. It has a lot area of approximately 1,400 square meters. It has about 28 meters of frontage along Graceland Avenue. There is a house under construction on the northern part of this lot, and there was a severance undertaken previously, which resulted in the creation of a new lot and a new house that was built at 634 Graceland. I'll also note that 630 Graceland has a storm sewer crossing diagonally through the property, which I'll show on another slide. So 620 Graceland is the larger property. It's the one on the south. It has about 2,300 square meters of frontage, so it's a little bit more than a half acre altogether. It has about 55 meters of frontage on Graceland and then another 48 meters or so on Forest Hill Drive East. It is an undeveloped lot, so there's no buildings on that property today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what this slide is showing is an excerpt from the city's the GIS K-map software, which shows the land use designation under the official plan. And the property is in the yellow area, indicating that it's designated for residential use. This is the broad residential designation that allows for a wide range of uses, anything from single attached houses to multi-story apartment buildings, as well as some neighborhood commercial uses. It really is the main area where residential development is intended in a fully serviced sort of form. And it's intended to help meet the city's housing and development goals. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing the current zoning. This is also an excerpt from the city's mapping software. And what this is showing is that the northern property, 630 Graceland, is zoned R1-3. This is what's referred to as a site-specific zone, but it is a zone that applies to large portions of land and subdivisions within Bay Ridge and this area of the city. It's a zone that allows a number of residential uses like single attached houses, some converted dwelling houses, and related uses like home occupations. It has the site-specific provisions of the R1-3 zone relate to minimum lot frontage and minimum lot area. But otherwise, all of the other performance standards like building height, lot coverage, yard setbacks are identical to the R1 zone. The southern property, the 620 Graceland, is zoned D for development. So it's a development zone. This is a zone that allows whatever is existing. So if there's an existing house on the property, it's allowed to exist. In this case, it's undeveloped, as I said. But the development zone doesn't allow any kind of new development, any kind of land division without first undertaking a rezoning. Next slide, please. So that's the reason we're here today, is because the two properties are in different zones, and they have this sort of jog in between the two of them, which results in a bit of a weird lot fabric. So the reason for the application that's being brought forward is to rezone the lands to permit the development of 4 residential lots, as shown on the slide here. Each would be developed with a single attached house. So the slide on the right-hand side is showing a few things. The thicker dashed lines that sort of run east to west from Graceland Avenue to the rear lot lines, those are proposed to be the new lot lines. And you can see, I referred earlier to a house that's been built at 630 Graceland. And that's the house that's shown sort of outlined in black. So the house is actually under construction and it's in the advanced stages of construction. So the intent is to locate a lot line immediately to the south of that. So that lot is actually outside of the scope of the zoning amendment application because the resulting lot would comply with the R1-3 zone. So that's the reason that we're proposing to rezone a portion of 630 Graceland rather than the entirety of that property, is that it's possible to sever off a lot there that meets the R1-3 zone. However, the retained portion of that lot would not comply with the same zoning. So in order for all of these severances to happen, the 4 sort of southernmost lots are proposed to be rezoned. Now these lots are going to have frontages ranging from 50 feet to a little over 60 feet. So there's a bit of a range in terms of their frontage, and you can see that each house could accommodate a fairly comfortably sized house, similar in scale to the one that's under construction. The site-specific zone would be an R1 zone that has some site-specific provisions that are only really required for the corner lot. That's the lot at the south that is at the corner of Forest Hill and Graceland Avenue. I'll specify what those amendments are in the next slide. As part of this whole process, the intent is also to realign that storm sewer. So the storm sewer you can see is that sort of dashed line that runs diagonally from sort of the top left of the screen. There's two dashed lines with some gray text in the center running sort of down and to the right. So that's the storm sewer that runs through 630. It's proposed to realign that and put it into the road allowance, so into Graceland Avenue. There will be applications for consent. Some have been submitted already. These applications won't be processed until after the zoning amendment process is complete. So they're effectively on hold until the zoning advances. And I think that's it for this slide. Thank you. Thank you. So on this slide, we're just showing what is the proposed zoning schedule, indicating what the new zone would be. We're proposing an R1 zone. On the left of the slide, I've listed the provisions that we're seeking to amend. So the minimum corner lot frontage, we're asking to reduce that to 18.9 meters from the bylaw requirement. So effectively, we're asking to reduce it from 70 feet down to 62 feet. We're asking to amend the exterior side yard from 20 feet to 11.8 feet, so about 3.6 meters. So that's the yard that between the house and Forest Hill Drive. We're also asking to amend the site triangle from 30 feet or 9.1 meters down to 3.5 meters, or 30 feet down to 11.4 meters. So the three amendments that we're asking for are related to the lot fabric. We're proposing some lots that are consistent with the R1 zone for the balance of the lands, but the R1 zone has a much higher requirement for corner lots. So we do need to, in order to fit the lots that are otherwise compliant with zoning for the interior lots, the corner lot has to be just a little bit narrower than the bylaw requires, but it's still substantially wider than any of the other lots that are proposed along this group of severances. The exterior side yard that's proposed is less than the R1 zone requires, but it's consistent with what we see in a lot of more contemporary subdivisions. A 3.6 meter side yard for the exterior yard is about 3 times what the interior side yard requirement is. So it's still a substantially larger yard along that side of the house, which allows for improved for landscaping and for the incorporation of the other provision that we're asking to change is the site triangle. So the site triangle is a standard requirement in the zoning bylaw. The 30 foot by 30 foot is a requirement that is absolutely needed at the intersection of major streets, collector roads, arterial roads, and things like that. Sometimes 30 feet is actually not enough and those have to be larger. But in the case of local streets such as this, what we found in advancing other subdivisions in the west end of the city is that at the intersection of local streets such as Graceland Avenue and Forest Hill Drive, a more modest site triangle of, say, of 3.5 meters by 3.5 meters is generally more than suitable when factored into the, when factored with an exterior side yard of 3.5 meters to provide for safe sight lines based on the widths of the road. So in addition to that, we are asking for a holding symbol, and that's based on the fact that not all of these lots, so the servicing in Graceland Avenue for sanitary is not there today. So in order for some of these lots to be developed, that servicing is going to have to be installed. We're proposing a holding symbol. There is a subdivision going into the south and west that I'm sure that this committee has awareness of, and that so there's a bit of discussion about the timing of the installation of the sanitary. So the holding provision is there to protect against the creation of lots that aren't serviced, and it'll effectively require that the servicing is installed before those lots can be created and houses built. Next slide, please. So in summary, it is my opinion that this is good land use planning. It's in proximity to bus routes and schools. These are some large lots in a residential area, and the lots that are proposed are very much in line with what's there. So for that reason, it's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement and represents an efficient use of land within the urban boundary. The proposal's consistent with rather it conforms to the official plan. And next slide, please. And with that, I welcome any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, quick question to staff. Have we received any correspondence to date on this file?
Yes, through Mr. Chair, this is Tim Fisher, planner. No, we have not received any public correspondence.
Thank you very much. I will now turn it over, go to the committee if there are any questions regarding this file. Now would be the time to ask, and then we'll go to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you. I do have several questions. This area is in my district, and some of the questions might be site plan questions. So I'll just ask right now, will this application be going for site plan approval, or does this one not do that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the proposed development would not be subject to site plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'll ask some questions then. Is there going to be a sidewalk on this side of Graceland, or does the sidewalk go on the other side? Because I know, like the applicant just mentioned about the big Graceland subdivision going in just below it, and I know sidewalks are going to be done. So is the sidewalk, is it going to be on this side where these 4 houses are going?
You, Mr. Chair. At this point, I'm actually not sure. The servicing plans and the drawings that I have don't show a sidewalk on that side of the road. So my supposition would be that they're proposed to be on the other side, but that's certainly something that we can look into and clarify.
Okay. I know that when it was just the one house on Graceland there, the residents on Forest Hill always had concerns about lighting. And so my next question was going to be, are the street lights on Graceland between Lincoln and Forest Hill going on your side with those 4 homes, or the other side? So if that could be noted as well for the final comprehensive report, what side the sidewalks are going on, what side the street lights are going on, that would be great. And how many street lights, just so we can get that lighting addressed in that little chunk of space between Lincoln and Forest Hill. At that intersection of Graceland and Forest Hill, there is right now quite a ditch, and the ditch, I used to get so many complaints about that ditch because like it is a ditch, and lots of weeds grow in there all summer long, and the city would never go and trim it. I would have to do a work order every single year to try to get that trimmed up. It was just, so I just wondered, when that 4th lot is built, let me just, it looks like there is, like, does the ditch stay the same way, or is there plans to do something with that ditch that then runs between Graceland and where the first homes on Forest Hill begin?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. The servicing drawings that were included with this application, the drawings themselves, there's a lot going on, but the report speaks to the intent there. And the intent is to fill in that ditch on the north side of Forest Hill and replace it with a curb and gutter along sort of the frontage of the properties here, and basically bury the stormwater infrastructure into pipes, and that along this location.
That's great. That's definitely good news. Will there be, so it says at the back of the lots, there's going to be a swale. And I just wondered, is there an intent also to fence it, or just to leave it with the swale?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just ask for clarification on the question.
The backyards, the rear yards, that then back onto that first house on Forest Hill?
So the swale, the fencing, I guess, on the rear property line, separating the swale from the existing properties to the east?
Yes, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have a fence shown on the plans.
Okay.
So that's certainly some feedback that we can take back to the applicant and clarify that question.
Okay, thank you. On your diagram as well, you show that there's like one tree in front of, it looks like every house is going to have a driveway and a garage. I guess that would be my first question. Is that true?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is the intent, is that each house would have an attached garage.
Okay, and then the trees that are kind of shown in there, those would be brand new trees. So will the entire lot, as far as you can tell, there is all going to be cleared when the 4 homes are built, and those will be new trees planted?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. The intention, in order to grade the lots to achieve the intended stormwater management controls and the locations of the swales, is that they are going to have to be cleared, and then new trees planted along the frontage, and then maybe a little more than one tree for the corner lot.
Okay, right. Okay, so that's good. And then the one thing that you said in the presentation about the site triangle, and you said that because this is residential, it would be more like I think you're looking, okay, supposed to be 30 feet by 30 feet, but you're asking for a reduction. So what site triangle around town would that be equivalent to? Just so I can drive to that intersection just to see, you know, like kind of what's proposed here for, you know, to find a comparable site triangle.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you'll find site triangles of that dimension in West Village. So in the subdivision that's going in behind the RioCan Center, at the intersection of local streets, you'll see a site triangles of that dimension. Given the state, the degree of completion of that subdivision, I'm not sure that there are any completed intersections yet that are at 3.5 by 3.5.
Okay. All right. And I guess in West Village, that wouldn't already be built out yet, would it?
That's correct. I know there's phase 1 is, I believe, just about complete. Phase 2 is underway. And at the intersection of phase 1, which is sort of a local street and a higher order street, I don't believe those include 3.5 meter site triangles. I think those are still the more traditional. In fact, in those cases, they're reduced to 8.5 by 4.5. So there's still a reduction from the standard bylaw requirement, but they're a little bit larger than 3.5, 3.5. So they're approved in West Village, but I don't think there are any built just yet.
All right. I just hope the residents on Forest Hill Drive don't complain since there's nothing existing right now that has the 3.5 by 3.5, and it doesn't seem like I'll be able to really understand what that would look like as far as when you're in a car and looking for the sight lines, but I leave that with staff to figure out. So my last question then to the applicant is, can you tell me, I don't know if you can tell me, right, but I just wondered what type of siding might be on the homes, like would it be brick, would it be stucco, or would it be aluminum siding? Like the homes on Forest Hill are beautiful, and you know, this is having all these homes now, what used to be one gorgeous big home with tons of trees, and they had like flowers, like their gardens were beautiful, to then split this up into the other 2 lots that are already, you know, are being built on, already be severed, and now to do 4 more homes in this stretch, like, is definitely something very different for the residents that have lived on Forest Hill Drive East. And so I just wondered, do you know what type of siding these homes will have?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know offhand, and that's a question that we can take back to the applicant and clarify for the committee's benefit. The sort of the range of sidings that are intended, I suspect that some of these houses are sort of further down the pipeline in terms of when they're going to be built. So they're probably a big question mark. But I know that this is generally a premium builder who builds with sort of higher quality materials, including siding. Okay. So that's certainly
that's good.
Part of the discussion that we'll have internally to clarify, and we can let staff know, and they can report that in their in the comprehensive.
Great, thank you. My only comment would be, I would hope it's in keeping with how the homes on Forest Hill Drive East look like. So thank you for answering all those questions.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
I was just wondering if Mr. Clark could just go over the reasons for the holding symbol. I was trying to write them down, but I didn't quite get there.
Mr. Leclerc?
Thank you for the question. And through you, Mr. Chair, the reason for the holding symbol is that the sanitary sewer in Graceland Avenue does not extend the full length from Graceland to Forest Hill. So there's a number of lots that are proposed that won't, at the time at this time, they won't have access to a sanitary sewer. So that sanitary sewer has to be installed in the ground before those lots can be developed and the houses built. So the holding symbol would allow the lots and the residential uses, but they won't be able to be completed until that infrastructure gets built.
So it's simply anticipatory.
That's correct. It is intended that infrastructure is planned to go in, whether it's to service these severances or the subdivision, sort of one or the other for sure are going to need it. So it's more a question of the timing of when that infrastructure gets built.
Have you heard any projections from the city?
In terms of timing, I have not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If Councillor Hill could take the chair, I just have a couple of very quick questions. Or
Take the
comments.
chair, recognizing.
Thank you. I realize that site plan is not compulsory within this development. Councillor Asanic brought up the issue of lighting and also the issue of sidewalk, potential sidewalk. The city has committed to making the city more pedestrian friendly. And I think Councillor Hill, Councillor Hutchison may agree with this. In those built out areas of the city that only have a sidewalk on one side of the road, councillors hear a lot about the need for sidewalks on both sides, particularly if it's family dwellings with children. So that's something that I would hope that our staff and the proponents, planners can work towards ensuring that we're developing pedestrian friendly with sidewalks on both sides. So if you could take that back as a strong recommendation from the committee, I think that I see a few nodding heads, so I think that would be good. So thank you. You may want to comment on that or not, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The comment is heard, and we'll certainly take it back and have that conversation internally. I think the answer that is not the one that is desirable to hear, but the answer is often one of cost, and sidewalks have that significant additional cost. But it's that the comment about the benefits of sidewalks and having sidewalks on both sides of the road is one that we share in terms of the desirability from a community building perspective. So it's a conversation that we'll have.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but frankly, I'd rather have the cost going to the developer rather than in a few years' time, the cost going to the city. So with all due respect. So if you want to return the chair, that'd be great.
I return the chair.
Thank you. So we will now turn to the public. So Mr. Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this issue?
I'll just ask that members of the public use the raise hand tool within Zoom or use the raise hand function within their phone app to signify that they wish to speak. Mr. Chair, it does not appear that anyone wishes to speak at this time.
Okay, I see somebody connecting to audio. Mike Gabriel?
Oh, that's been occurring for quite some time, and I believe he is one of the applicants with another file, so I don't think it's specific to this.
No problem. Thank you very much. So we'll go back to the committee. Are there any late breaking thoughts that you want to bring forward? Seeing none, I'll declare this non-statutory public meeting as completed and just recommend if you have issues to put them in writing or return to the statutory meeting when it happens. So we'll now go into Planning Committee meeting number 16-2020 and I'll call this meeting to order. I need a mover and a seconder for the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Asanic. Councillor Hill. Any corrections, questions? No. All those in favor? Carried. Confirmation of minutes from our September 17th meeting. We've all received a copy of them. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Hutchison and Councillor Hill. Any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. So, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move on to our first order of business in our regular meeting, which is 67 to 69 Chatham Street. And
Mr. Chair, I believe the Isle of Man application is actually the first file.
Oh, sorry. I flipped the page too soon. I appreciate that. So that's I'm sorry, I lost my page.
It's the application for zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. Waleed Al-Barki is the staff presenter.
Isle of Man Road. I found it. Thank you. It's been a rough day. Would our planners wish to make a comment regarding correspondence on this?
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Chair. Before I actually start the presentation or answering any question, I would like to know if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can, very clearly.
Thank you. Would you like me to start with the presentation or?
Yes, please do.
Thanks. So, my name is Waleed Al-Barki. I'm a planner with the City of Kingston. This is a comprehensive report and recommendations related to a combined application that includes an amendment to the city's official plan and an amendment to zoning bylaw 32-74, and also a draft plan of subdivision for a property located at 2305 Isle of Man. I would like to point out that a public meeting was held in respect to this application back in August 2019. Next slide, please. The goal of this combined application is to allow for the creation of 5 waterfront lots. These lots are proposed to be similar in size to the ones in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. The subject property, as shown in the map, is on the south side of Isle of Man Road, and it fronts on Gibraltar Bay. Gibraltar Bay is part of the UNESCO designated Erdu canal system. The surrounding area has a mix of estate residential lots and large parcels that are used for agriculture. Next slide, please. The subject property is approximately 6.2 hectares, and it's currently vacant of buildings, and it has 2 vehicular accesses, and are the ones shown on the slide here. Next slide, please. Okay, so the proposal as shown on the map and also on the table aims at creating 5 lots. The smallest of the 5 lots will be approximately 0.9 hectares. And each of the proposed lots is going to have a frontage on Isle of Man for vehicular access, as well as a frontage on Gibraltar Bay. Next slide, please. So what is the reason for the application? The existing OB designation and the existing zoning, which are shown on the slide, do not allow for such subdivision. And therefore, there's a proposal to change the OB designation to estate residential and the zoning to be site-specific estate residential. it should be mentioned here that the OB designation for the part of the property, which is about 30-meter wide, is not going to change. It's going to be environmental protection area, meaning that very limited tree clearance could be possible in the future. Next slide, please. So all the proposed amendments were evaluated against all the applicable policies and criteria of the provincial policy statement and the OB. And it is staff's view that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement and also conforms to the OB. And one thing to mention here that there were some comments / concerns before the public meeting and after. The main ones are shown on the slide here. So I will go from the top down. So the first concern was about the western vehicular access. And one of the conditions in the draft plan of subdivision will have a requirement to shift this to be entirely within one of the lots that are being proposed. As for the other concern about the water quality, the revised hydrogeological study demonstrated that there will be no water interference and no negative impact on the neighboring water aquifer. As for the last concern / comment about stormwater, there will be a requirement before the final subdivision for a stormwater and drainage plan to show that there will not be any negative impact on the neighboring properties. Next slide, please. In conclusion, and based on the analysis mentioned before, staff recommends the approval of the application. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn to the committee if there are any questions regarding the presentation. Yes, Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to staff. For that 30-meter EPA zone, that is below the cliff, right? Between the water and the cliff. That's where it's that 30-meter EPA. Is that right?
So you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's right. So this will be between the high water mark and inside the land where it is actually kept as it is. So there is no change, which means that in the future, any tree clearance will be very limited and it will be only allowed after consultation with CRCA as well as Parks Canada. And if it is allowed, it will be only allowed just for future docks.
Okay. All right. So that's where I was kind of going at. So how do we protect the trees down below if they want to come down the cliff and have access to the water? So if they want to build a dock, they would have to apply for a permit through the CRCA, right? For building on the water course. That's what we were just saying.
So you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. And it will be more than just CRCA. It will also include Parks Canada and the city will be involved. Okay,
that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee before we, yes, Councillor Hutchison.
As I remember this, there's quite a bit of talk about how this type of development lines up with the city's declaration of a climate emergency. Did that come up? And if so, what conclusion was come to?
So you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can actually, there's one slide that might help explain the situation. So if you could please go to the slide after the conclusion. Thank you. Okay, so when we are talking about climate change, it's related to sustainability. And these are very general concepts that might differ from one location to the other and also from one type of development to the other. So we can not hold all applications to the same standard. So when it comes to climate change and sustainability for that specific location, there are 6 different categories that are shown on the slide. If these categories or the most relevant of them to the application are met, then this application will be considered to be meeting the climate change slash sustainability aspect. And I'm going to go from the top down. So the first 3 ones about protection of groundwater and protection of natural and cultural features, as well as protection of shoreline, will be met because we are implementing all the recommendation of the technical studies and commenting agencies as condition in the draft plan of subdivision. In terms of also not resulting in extension of municipal infrastructure, the application, sorry, the subject site is already on an existing road and will not require any extension of municipal infrastructure. And also because the proposed lots are big enough, they can be used for sustainable practices such as food production. As for the last category, which is about means of travel, the location is far away from the city and it cannot be expected to meet that criteria. But overall and on balance, the whole application in general demonstrates compliance with 5 of the 6 categories mentioned, and that's why it was deemed to be sustainable.
Thank you.
Okay. It's not okay, but I guess my question would be that, I mean, I followed what you said there, but I'm wondering how that changes the way we do things and how this development demonstrates that.
So, Mr. Chair, one of the unique characteristics of the application we are talking about is that it is a remnant of a subdivision that was done in the 80s, which included 7 lots to the west. And this one, which is located in between, is just what is left of that subdivision. And currently, it's not being used for agricultural uses, just because how the topography is. It has 2 main slopes, and the area for agriculture is very limited on the site. That's why, under normal circumstances, the city might have taken a different position in terms of recommending approval for that kind of proposal. But for the existing one, it would be hard to basically object such an application just because of the uniqueness of it and the smallness of the size. And it's also in between 2 existing subdivisions. So basically, it's a continuation of what started, and it could have started earlier.
Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Agnew has something to add.
Thank you. Just a question of clarification for Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Hutchison, are you more asking questions from a climate change perspective related to the patterns of land use? Or are you thinking about carbon specifically? I'm just trying to make sure I understand exactly what you're asking to see if I have any other further insights to offer.
I think the question is, if we're serious about climate change, we have to ask these questions of every development. And the answer, I mean, I think the answers are fine within a certain limited purview. That it's a continuation of the 1980s subdivision, and perhaps technically, and that this is the impression I got from the comments, that technically we're not in a position to change the ground rules for development like this. That's one thing. The second thing I've thought of is that we don't, does this site have particular, there's something scratching my brain about this from the public meeting. This site have particular limitations? I remember all the talk about drainage and so on being a problem.
Have those issues been addressed?
So perhaps, councillors, if I may, I will respond to Councillor Hutchison's comments with respect to questioning land use patterns and provide some comments on that. And then perhaps, Waleed, if you want to be able to answer the technical question related to any restrictions on the property after I've done my comments, that might be helpful. I think to your point, Councillor Hutchison, you're correct. And this is something certainly from a planning policy perspective that we've been talking about more and more over the last year as a city, and particularly through some of the density but by design work is really illuminating for council and the public that land use patterns and the way that we allocate density and where we locate density and people living and how people move around the city are some of our greatest tools that we have in the fight against climate change, 100%. And, you know, as a result of that, we are doing planning policy work now that's more reflective of that lens or that point of view. And a lot of that's building off of council's commitments to climate change leadership that have been really important over the last year. We do know as well that we have the climate leadership plan and the consultation. You just received a report on that through council that's coming this fall. And that will also be an exercise of reviewing our planning policies holistically with respect to climate change, GHG reduction, looking at our 2040 goals with respect to carbon neutrality. But at the present time, you're correct, Councillor, in that the provincial policy statement directs cities to provide a variety of housing options, both rural and urban. And we did receive some comments today asking about a previous board decision with respect to an appeal on Isle of Man Road. And one of the natures of that appeal was the suggestion that by way of our official plan, generally wanting urban development and not being very much in favor of these types of rural development patterns as we start to move towards more efficient land use patterns, being something that our official plan actually prohibited. And there was a position that was taken on that several years ago, and that was a board hearing that the city actually lost. So we know based on that our official plan doesn't prohibit it, which means we can't outright say no to it. But what we do have the opportunity to do is constantly review and look at our policies, and we're doing so now through a land use and climate change lens that the city hasn't previously used before. So I think as part of that ongoing policy work in the climate leadership plan, those are some strong things that we're going to have to contend with as a city and look at whether we need to change our land use policies so that we can apply a different standard should the city choose with respect to either rural developments or urban developments and looking at setting parameters. But the way that our policy documents are set up now, they're set up to be able to support this form of development on a limited basis subject to policy tests that Waleed has talked about this evening. So Waleed, if you want to provide any comments with respect to restrictions on the property, I will mute my microphone.
So seeing no further comments, I think that was 2014.
Okay, so you, Mr. Chair.
Lost that OMB hearing. Sorry, Waleed.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. So
not to worry, I do that all the time. Go ahead.
So you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to circle back to the question about water management. There are conditions about basically acquiring the future lots not to have any negative impact in terms of stormwater management. And this will be reviewed and has to be approved by our engineering department.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, I will open this up to the public. If there are any members of the public, you're given 5 minutes to ask questions, make comments. Just identify yourself and your address. So, Mr. Clerk.
For the members of the public who are present, if you wish to speak, please unmute yourself using Zoom by using the raise hand tool or hit *9 for those of you that have called in. Mr. Chair, there are no members of the public interested in speaking.
Okay. We'll go back to the committee and we will put the motion on the floor. So if there are any further comments or questions, members of the committee would be recognized. So is there a mover and a shaker for the? Thank you, Councillor Hill. Thank you, Councillor Hutchison. Any further comments regarding this file? Yes, Councillor Hutchison. If you want to unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. It usually popped up right away and it didn't. So I
There
thought
you go.
on, but you're right, I wasn't. So just extremely briefly, we need to change those land use policies because otherwise we're just carrying on. We see in this this proposal and the previous one too, just carrying on in the way that we did in the 1970s and 80s. And I'm not saying entirely. I appreciate what Commissioner Agnew said. We are making some changes, but probably not at a rate that's a fast enough rate to matter that much. So that's why I brought it up, because it doesn't hurt. It's needed to be said all the time. And so I think we got the message from Ms. Agnew, and I think we should follow up on it. In some degree, we're going to be hearing about it in the relatively near future, according to what I got from what she said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item B, which is 6769 Chatham Street. Who would like to speak to this file?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Through you. My name is Tim Fisher. I'm a planner of the City of Kingston. We are looking at the comprehensive report for 67 and 69 Chatham Street, which is zoning bylaw amendment D14002-2020. Next slide, please. So this originally was addressed at a public meeting held on March 26, 2020. And there were quite a bit of input, I guess, that was raised not only by the public, but also by the committee. The applicants actually went back and amended their plans to reduce the number of bedrooms that were actually being proposed. So the plans now have been updated to construct a new 3-story, 3-unit row dwelling with no basement now. So that has effectively removed 2 bedrooms from each of the units. Next slide here, please. So as you can see, the site is on the corner of Chatham Street and Elm Street. It's predominantly residential. It has quite a variety of different residential types, ranging from single family, multiple family, and a couple of walk-up apartments. Next slide. So the current building that is there now is a 2-unit structure, pretty much a semi-detached dwelling with parking in the rear. Here you can see the frontage along Chatham Street and the frontage along Elm Street. Next slide. The proposed development here will obviously remove the existing structure, construct a 151 square meter 3-unit structure, which will maintain the front of the dwelling facing Chatham Street, with the rear yard still facing the east side. 2 parking spaces are proposed, and bicycle parking or storage is actually proposed as well too, in behind the 2 parking spaces within an accessory structure. Next slide. So here is where you're going to see the changes. So as we can see, the inner floor of the main floor, there is no basement, so it's going to be a slab on grade type of development. You can see there obviously no stairs going downstairs. Each unit's going to have its own living, dining, and kitchen, and then with the bedrooms on the 2nd story and the attic space story. Next slide. So the 2nd story, we see 2 bedrooms and a main bath. And the next slide. Again, 2 bedrooms within the attic space with its own shared bathroom as well too. Next slide. So the views from Chatham Street, as you can see, the roof line is being dropped a little to try to give it a little less of a height appearance along the road. It does appear to be a 3-story structure, but in essence, it's actually a 2.5-story if one was to drive down the road. Because of the mansard roof that they're proposing. Again, the doorways, the main entrances are actually still going to be located along Chatham Street. Next slide. And the rear of the building would obviously have an egress from the main floor into private amenity area, which each of the units are going to have in the rear yards. Next slide. So through this process, we did ask for a concept rendering. However, the materials may change. The subject development is not subject to site plan control. However, it may be up to the developer to come up with a type of material that is going to be sympathetic to the existing development in the area. Next slide. So the public concerns that were brought up was overdevelopment. The overdevelopment aspect was going from 2 units to 3 units. However, this is quite a trend that we have been seeing within this neighborhood. We've seen a lot of single family, multiple family homes being converted into adding additional units, or even a total tear down and rebuild of a new development containing multiple units. There were concerns with on-street parking. Those issues have been looked at. It is within an area of permit parking, and engineering do not feel that parking in this particular area would be an issue, especially based on the parking study that was provided for this development. The number of on-site parking, the owner is providing 2 parking spaces. The bylaw does require 1 parking space per dwelling unit, so they are requesting a reduction of 1 parking space. However, because of the proximity to transit or other modes of transportation here, it does make sense for them to be providing additional bicycle storage, which would give tenants here an alternative mode of transportation here. Amenity area, there was concerns in regards to that with the area in behind in the rear yards. However, the amenity space that is being provided is satisfactory for each of the units. Again, the basement use was another concern, using the basement to provide 2 additional bedrooms. And this brings us into the last one, which the number of bedrooms. The owner has listened and actually removed the basements, which in essence remove 2 bedrooms out of each of the units here. Next slide. So the provisions that we're actually looking at amending in this for this development, we're looking at permitted uses. So in this zone, multiple family dwellings are permitted. However, a 3-unit row dwelling is not defined as a multiple family dwelling. So we actually have to define it here, or sorry, add it as a permitted use. So that's why we are requesting the 3-unit row dwelling. Lot line interpretation, that's more of to deal with the positioning of the house and dealing with what we would consider what would be the front yard, exterior, side yards, that type of thing. So it's more for a clarification purpose. The minimum front yards, 7.5 meters. However, the majority of the development in the area doesn't even comply with the 7.5 meters. It's quite a variety of a setback. They're proposing 3 meters. The minimum side yard, which is actually half the height of the main dwelling. This requires 5 meters. Again, this is for new development, which in the B zone, or I should say the B3 zone, is intended for lot consolidation. So the city anticipated in the B3 zone people consolidating all these lots and then building a larger development, which then would require a larger or greater side yard. However, in this neighborhood, we're not seeing that. We're seeing redevelopment of smaller lots. So it's quite common to see a change in this provision. Next slide, please. Minimum aggregate side yard, again, the same thing. Again, the minimum aggregate side yard typically is in place in order to allow access into the side or rear yards for parking. And this being a corner lot, it will satisfy the intent of the aggregate side yard. The maximum height, let's see here. The height and side yard functions, sorry. Sorry, so the proposal is 10.7 meters. So we are capping that height at the 10.7, just to ensure that it's not going to be any higher in the future. If they do, then they're going to be coming back for an amendment to this section. Minimum rear yards, again, 10 meters is the minimum requirement. We're looking at 6.3. I guess we'll just go on to the next slide here. I guess one of the concerns that were brought up during the public meeting was the maximum percentage of lot occupancy. That is 100%, but that is based on the total lot, or sorry, the total floor area of the development. So in this case, it's, although they're not building at 100%, the floor area ratio, you're looking at actually it's going to be a 136% lot occupancy. So so we did have to amend that provision. Again, I've already addressed the parking provisions. Bicycle parking standards are actually being reduced as well too. A slight difference in the width and definitely in the length. And again, that's to accommodate 2 parking spaces within the site. The accessory building, that is required for 0 meters in order to locate the bicycle parking right along the lot line. And again, for clarification purposes, the definition of a multiple family dwelling, the bylaw does not recognize a row dwelling as a multiple family dwelling. So in this case, we are just clarifying this as a row dwelling being a multiple family dwelling. This would also require the bicycle parking to be considered as a provision. Next slide. All right, so the recommendation. So the proposed 3-story, 3-unit dwelling is compatible with the existing residential neighborhood and will not result in any adverse impacts. In addition, the proposed development will contribute to the city's housing supply. Adequate amenity space, parking, landscape will be provided. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms with the City of Kingston official plan. So staff recommends approval of this application for zoning bylaw amendment. I leave it in your hands and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to the committee then. Questions or comments? Seeing none. Councillor Hill, will you take the chair?
I take the chair and I recognize you.
Yeah, I think Chatham Street is going through a bit of a reimagining, and a quick question probably for one of our planners. The row housing, if this is kitty corner to a beautiful row house, that's row housing that is almost a block long. And there's a lot of solid reasons why row housing, especially in a time when you're trying to conserve energy, is a sensible approach. Will we amend, do we need to amend our official plan or whatever to allow, or zoning to allow for row housing to not have to be rationalized through forgiveness?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is something that we can definitely look at through the consolidation of our zoning bylaw. And it has been raised before as well too.
Thank you. The development as it shows in the rendering, I think is an improvement on the street. I'm a little concerned about the reduction. There'll be 6 bedrooms, if I'm correct. So the reduction to only 2 parking spaces. And I have a little bit of trouble getting my head around that, but 0.67 is what we're allowing the developments along Princess Street to realize for parking requirements. So, so I guess people who move there will have to keep that in mind and not bring a car with them when they come. I would imagine, as much of that street is, it'll be a lot of students that are residing in these units. And it is an improvement over the existing property. So I will be supporting it. So thank you.
I return the chair.
Excellent. Any further questions or comments? Seeing, yes, Mr. Fisher. I saw you light up. But...
Oh, no, through you, Mr. Chair. I think it just caught my mic.
Okay, not to worry. So I will now open this up to, oh, sorry. Did I see Councillor Hutchison's hand? The floor is yours.
Okay, I just wanted to support the chair's request for facilitating row housing. In the past quite a way back, actually. It seems to me row housing was considered to be cheaper and not desirable in certain areas. That in terms of the reasons he gave for energy conservation and intensification of housing, there's good reasons to support it. And I also might say that if you look at Toronto, some of the row housing is getting built is not exactly cheap, to put it mildly. So it really depends what kind of row housing you're building. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't press ahead with that for a number of good reasons.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? If not, we will turn to the public. Again, the public will have 5 minutes and should identify by name and address. Are there any hands up, Mr. Clerk?
No, they're not at this time. I'll just remind the member of the public that if they wish to speak, they need to raise their hand within Zoom. And seeing no hands, Mr. Chair, I'll let you proceed.
Thank you. So we'll go back into the committee, and if there's a mover and a seconder, we'll put this on the floor. Councillor Hill, Councillor Osanek. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. So we'll move on to our final business item of the evening, which is 425 and 427 Division Street. And that, I believe, is a Ruffo 10 Consultants file as well. Who will be speaking to this one?
Hi, Mr. Chair. It's Tim Fisher again, planner, City of Kingston. Through you, Mr. Chair, I will try to make this one a little quicker.
No problem. Go right ahead. Okay.
So we have property here at 425, 427 Division Street, zoning bylaw amendment D14006, 2020. Next slide, please. So this proposal is to permit development of a two and a half story semi-detached residential dwellings on separate lots. There are concurrent consent applications, which are actually, well, a consent application, which is currently on hold until the zoning is in place. One of the dwellings will front on Division Street, while the other dwelling will front on Adelaide Street. The applicant is actually proposing a second residential unit in each of the semi-detached units. That will be addressed once the severances have taken place. The purpose of the consent applications is to establish 2 lots, which historically this property was 2 lots, and I will show you. Next slide, please. So the subject lot is on the corner of Division and Adelaide. It's got quite a presence on the street, highly visible. There's quite a range of different types of development in this area. We got commercial and residential. We got a lot of multiple family residential development within this spot. Next slide. So currently, I believe the house has been torn down. However, you do see the small house here and the vacant lot next door. And along Adelaide Street, it's just a chain link fence and the rear yards. Next slide. So previous development on this site, as you can see, in 1971, it was 2 separate lots. You see there's 427, which was the house that you saw in the photo, which has been removed, and 425, which was removed sometime between 1998 to 2004. The lots did merge on title in August 30, oh, actually on August 31st, 2012, when the property was purchased by a single owner. Next slide. So this proposal, we're looking at recreating 2 lots. However, they're not going to be the historical lots. They're going to accommodate new development. We have a semi-detached, which is facing Division Street, and the other semi-detached, which is actually facing Adelaide Street. Each of the properties are going to have its own parking spaces as well too. Next slide. As we can see here, the foundation, we have foundation and lower floor plans. As you can see, the lower floor plans, they're showing the intent of the secondary suite. Next slide. First floor, we have the living amenities, and then the second floor, we have the bedrooms in each of the units. Next slide. And then the attic plan, again, we have 2 more bedrooms that are going to be located in each of the units. Or, yeah, sorry. Next slide. So both of the semi-detached dwellings are going to be very similar. They have provided elevations, the east and north elevations, which kind of gives you an idea of the side profile and the profile looking from the street. Next slide. So during the public meeting held on July 9th, 2020, there were no public input at that time, and we haven't received anything in between then as well. Next slide. So zoning provisions, I'm not going to go too much into details here. I will again state in this case, very similar to the previous application, this zone allows for a 1 and 2 family dwelling. However, semi-detached dwelling is defined differently. It is not defined within a 2 family dwelling. So here we are asking for the semi-detached use to be allowed within the A zone. Historically, the city had allowed semi-detached units as to be defined as a 2 family dwelling. However, based on recent interpretations of the bylaws, we recognize that there is specific wording in there that shows that there is a difference between the 2. So we're just making this permitted here. The minimum lot areas, they do look a little low. However, that is based on each of the dwelling units. So if we actually put them together, you're actually doubling for each of these semi-detached. Again, we're looking at it as the 160 square meters to anticipate future severance along the common party wall. This would avoid them coming back and asking for another change or a variance in the future for this provision. Next slide, please. The residential building height is going to be slightly higher, but again, that is also to accommodate the additional height that's being required for the basement in order to have the second unit in there, and also the pitch of the roof as well too. Off-street parking, I do just want to touch really quick. 3 parking spaces are being proposed. 2 parking spaces for the northern lot and 1 for the southern lot for the one development on which faces Division Street. Next slide. And again, the projection into yards, that's to address the walkways, the porches type of thing at the rear of the building. Next slide. Okay, so the proposed two semi-detached dwellings, each on its intended separate lots, will be compatible with the existing residential neighborhood and will not result in any adverse impacts. In addition, the proposed development will contribute to the city's housing supply. Adequate amenity space, parking, and landscape area will be provided. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement and does conform with the official plan. The staff recommends approval of this application, and I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. We'll go to the committee now. Are there any comments or questions? I believe the district councillor has a question. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's like I cut off my laptop's at low battery, so I'll try to spit this out in a hurry. I forgot to hook it up. I don't have any real objection to this development, except for the conniptions that seem to be gone through to make the parking work. I just want to share I understand this. In the end, we have 7 parking spaces for these 2 buildings. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Chair, yes. In total, 7 parking spaces.
Okay, so the issue that is here is the same as what was in the public, quite detailed public comment on 6769 Chatham, which is the number of bedrooms relative to the number of parking spaces afforded for. And I think if you think that students are going to be there, then you're not too worried about it. But if it isn't, then it could be a problem, especially for the one that faces west on Division, since it's a pretty busy road in a gateway to the city, and you've got tandem parking there. So so what I calculate there is that there's 10 bedrooms on the property altogether, if you take before severing. So let's see, there's for each building. So that is that no, that's wrong. 10 for the 2 properties. So do we take that into account as to how many likely users there are for parking needs?
Through Mr. Chair, that is a good question. During our review, we review each of the units based on a single family dwelling use. So we don't look at the number of bedrooms in regards to parking. Parking is actually only based on the number of units. So in this case, the owner is being upfront and showing us that his intent is to put in a secondary unit. So if a secondary unit was not being proposed here, we would only be looking at 1 parking space for each of the units. Because they're proposing the second residential unit, they will require a second parking space, and in that second residential bylaw, or in the bylaw in regards to that, it does allow for the tandem parking of a parking space. So although only 1 of the units is requesting a reduction in parking, we feel based on their parking study that they provided, it makes sense for the type of development that they are proposing, reviewing it on a single family use.
Right. That's fair enough. I did read, I read the report. I realized they used, I think it was 0.88 or 0.75 as the standard. And that's higher than some that we've okayed the downtown area. So I realize how you get on the Division Street, you get to 3 spaces, and Adelaide, you get to 4. Just one thing, I think for a counselor, the problem is, and this is happening, is we're concerned about what it's like to live there after the fact, after the place gets built. And, you know, people have more or less walked away. And that is, we're parking for visitors and the people that didn't get parking because of the low ratio, where they're going to go. And that goes even more so if they're facing on the Division, which is a major thoroughfare. It's an artery. So I'm just sort of raising this. I mean, I don't think we're going to do anything about this one right now, but it is concerning to me because I had a similar thing at Pine and Division. And I'm wondering if we keep, monitor these things and see if they're actually working. Because if there's no parking on the site, we know where they're going to go. And that's on the street. And that can cause problems. And I'm quite sure, like Councillor Neal knows this problem quite well, especially in the Williamsville North area. So do we monitor them all at all? What happens when we make these decisions?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll hand this over to Paige Agnew.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, definitely, Councillor Hutchison. So do we do an individual review of applications that have been built? I wouldn't say that we're going out from property to property and checking them, but certainly we do monitor these from a staff perspective. And this is one of the elements that we've been looking at closely over the last year or so with the introduction of the second unit policies being as of right in a number of areas of the city. So when we were writing those policies, we were trying to figure out how to best accommodate the parking and also not impact rear yard or front yard. Because we don't want to have parking in the front yard. We don't want to have too much parking in the rear yard. We recognize that we want to accommodate additional units and have to based on provincial direction wherever possible. Also for what it does in terms of providing opportunities for people to enter the housing market differently and also have more affordable small units that are available integrated within neighborhoods, which helps with our overall housing supply issue. But it does create issues associated with parking. And you're correct that what we do see in terms of visitors, because at a residential or low density residential level, we're not accommodating for visitor parking the way we may be for a multi-res building. So what we do in fact see is that visitors, or sometimes if there are more cars than what's accommodated for in terms of parking spaces, because we have a parking rate on a per unit basis, it spills over into the street. And then we have a number of people parking on street, which, as you know, can create issues. Some areas of the city, we have parking passes required for on-street parking. I don't believe it applies specifically in this area, but then we also have issues that goes into the winter time when we have on-street parking restrictions with snow removal. So it is an ongoing, it's a bigger city issue that we're trying to figure out how to accommodate additional units within neighborhoods without having too much parking in the front yard, but then recognizing that as a city, we haven't moved to a place where we're doing more active transportation than we are car dependent driving. So it's one of these pieces that we're going to have to continue to figure out. So it's a long answer to say, yes, we are looking at it at the global level. And yes, we have been looking at it really specifically since the as of right policies have come in for second units, particularly because we have seen additional on-street parking, and then that results in more enforcement calls. So it's an overall challenging situation that we have to figure out as a city as we move towards greater sustainability and less car-oriented driving. It could mean less cars overall, but we haven't gotten there yet as a city. So oftentimes we have more cars than we have people living in houses, just based on the nature, especially in the suburban areas of the city. So it's an overall challenge that I would say that we're monitoring, and we don't have it 100% figured out right, but we are certainly aware of it and open certainly to feedback from councillors at any point in time if you have some suggestions of things we're not thinking about.
Well, thank you for that. I actually really appreciate the answer, because it drew together a number of threads that we're trying to deal with and facing constantly. And I think, as you mentioned, I think, or you alluded to, is that enforcement will bring some of these to mind, but it's also something that people tend to just put up with. The one thing I like about this development is it's like 4 bedrooms for each semi, or half of the semi, and that's adjustable. Like, I mean, it could be used for family, and eventually someday, and depending on how things evolve. And so I think that's a positive as well. And just one very small thing is that when I was trying to figure out just how to calculate and catch up with staff and reading this, is on it's cited on page 279 of, or 21 of 27 of the report. One requires 1 parking space per dwelling for 1 or 2 family dwelling. And then later on page 271 of the whole document, it requires 1.4 spaces. Either way, you end up with the same calculation. So, you know, roughly. So I thought, forget that, but it's unclear sometimes where we're going when you get 2 different measurements. So I just say that. So I'm fine. I'll vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, would you take the chair very briefly, Councillor Hill?
The chair recognize you.
Thank you very much. Quick comment. I know with Ms. Agnew and others have been looking at the possibility of basing parking on bedrooms rather than units. In Williamsville, we have some units that were like 6-bedroom units and only required 1 parking space. I know that I believe it's Guelph that has adopted a policy of giving a fraction of a building of a parking space per bedroom instead. Are we moving ahead with our comprehensive zoning to look at making that happen here in Kingston as well?
Commissioner Agnew?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Chair. Yes, we are. So we are moving forward, and you'll be receiving a report in November that provides an update on the comprehensive zoning bylaw with a schedule of how we intend to bring that forward for completion in 2021 with some key milestones on the public consultation. So the parking component of that is a major consideration because we're looking at a complete overhaul from what we've traditionally done from a parking perspective, and that has included the consideration of parking on a per bedroom basis. So we're still working through the technical detail of that, and we've had the parking study peer reviewed just to be able to look at what's happening in the industry and specifically council. I'm not sure about Guelph, but I do know that Waterloo for sure does in certain areas of the city have a parking ratio on a per bedroom basis. So and that's really been in their post-secondary areas to be able to support higher density and multi-res buildings. So that is something from an industry perspective that we're looking at. We're looking at parking reductions in Williamsville right now, and some of that work is going to be coming through to you as a committee before the end of November. But for right now, we're on a per unit basis, but certainly looking at that, and there will be an opportunity to have a focused discussion probably pretty early in 2021 on the new parking standards that we're suggesting for the new zoning bylaw to come forward in 2021 for completion.
I appreciate that. And you're right, it was Waterloo, not Guelph. But I think that would be, it may not be necessary right across the city, but in the core of the city, I think a per bedroom ratio would work well. So Thank you very much.
And I return the chair.
Thank you. So, are there any members of the public that wish to speak? Mr. Clerk?
To the member of the public, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. See no hands, Mr. Chair, we'll let you proceed.
Thank you very much. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Hill, Councillor Sanik. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So that was our last business portion.
Sorry,
sorry.
Mr. Chair, we actually lost quorum a second ago when Councillor Hutchison had his computer crash. So perhaps we can call a recess and we'll get him to log back in.
Okay. Point of order, Councillor Hill.
We only have 5 on the committee now, so
So three would be quorum.
As my former principal, you're probably aware of my math marks, so we're grateful that you're here.
Okay. So we do indeed have quorum.
and I'm going to see you after class, James.
So I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We have no motions. I don't believe we have any notices of motion. Other business? Seeing none. Correspondence? Seeing none. The date of our next meeting is October 15th at 6:30. And I would love a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hill, Councillor Sanik, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Take care.